All right, good morning again, everyone. This is the weekly impact briefing for Central North Carolina for the upcoming week, which runs January 14th through the 21st. Before we get into the forecast, just take a quick look back at the precipitation amounts from this past weekend's winter storm over parts of Central North Carolina. We had about 1/4 of an inch of ice across much of the northwest Piedmont, from the Triad, Winston-Salem vicinity over toward Greensboro, up toward Roxboro. And then amounts were much, much less on the southeastern fringe of that as you get over toward Burlington and Durham, and not a whole lot of anything other than just a cold rain for elsewhere in Central North Carolina. But it was an impactful system for at least a few counties in Central North Carolina with, again, around 1/4 of an inch of ice. So the upper air map from this morning, up in the upper levels of the atmosphere, shows an upper level trough extending from the middle Atlantic coast back across the Ohio Valley and into the Central Plains. And that upper trough is forecast to slowly settle southeastward through Central North Carolina through tonight. And that may play a role in the production of a little light precipitation over parts of North Carolina through tonight. This is a simulation from one of the near-term high-resolution models, again, with that forecast for precipitation. And it looks like there's a chance for a little light rain or sprinkles developing from the mountains down into the southern Piedmont in the vicinity of Charlotte, and then down toward Albemarle and those areas during the evening hours. That appears to be all liquid with any light precipitation that falls with that. But notice another axis of precipitation that the model's trying to generate from central Virginia southeastward into the northeast Piedmont and northern coastal plain of North Carolina, from around Farmville, Virginia, down toward South Hill, Virginia, and then Roanoke Rapids, Rocky Mount, maybe even Lewisburg vicinities. And if that precipitation indeed materializes, that may be in the form of a little light snow or flurries during the very late night hours into early tomorrow morning. Right now, we're not expecting that to amount to a whole lot of anything, if it does even materialize, but certainly something we're going to watch for as we go through tomorrow. Once we get through that little threat of light precipitation overnight tonight, much of the work week looks dry and relatively mild. We should have high pressure building from the southern plains early this week, eastward across the southeastern United States through the middle of the week. And then a weak frontal system moves into the region late Thursday into early Friday, and that will present our next real chance of any significant precipitation. But that still looks at this time to be pretty light, perhaps 1/10 to 1/4 of an inch of all liquid, again around Thursday night. And then looks like we'll be mild on Friday, and as we start the weekend, and a relatively strong system is forecast to impact the region later in the weekend. That looks like a fairly wet system with around 1/2 an inch, perhaps an inch of rain. There is a small threat of a little wintry precipitation at the onset over the far northwest Piedmont and similar areas that received the wintry precipitation this past weekend, but it looks like that would be a very fleeting occurrence and is unlikely at this time. It looks like that system is going to be a primarily wet one for our area. And then behind that system, perhaps some of the coldest air of the season coming in with very strong Arctic high pressure building southeastward out of the higher latitudes down into the central United States, and then that will build eastward over the eastern United States by the early part of next week. So some of that colder air will be starting to surge into our area late Sunday, and then particularly by Monday, most likely following any moisture associated with that system. But we'll be on the lookout for a potential changeover to a little light wintry precipitation as the moisture's moving away and the cold air is rushing in. But typically those regimes don't support a whole lot of changeover. It's a case of the cold air comes in a little too late. Severe thunderstorm potential this week, certainly this time of year in the middle of January. Severe climatologically, we don't expect any severe weather, and indeed this week we're not expecting any. There is perhaps a chance as we get into that weekend with that stronger system approaching we can't rule out some isolated thunderstorms with that, but we're a long ways off from that. But certainly it's a very dynamic and strong looking system at this time range, and it may present some thunder potential as we get into next weekend. Precipitation forecast, again, it's going to be dry through much of the work week, with that light rain centered around Thursday night, with generally, again, around 1/10 to perhaps 1/4 of an inch with that, and then the wetter system moving in for the weekend, particularly the latter half of the weekend. And as we look ahead to next week, again, looks like it's going to be turning potentially much colder by the early part of next week, with much below normal temperatures centered over the Great Lakes and extending over most of the eastern half to third of the country, generally east of the Rockies. So it looks like a very cold pattern setting up for next week, with generally equal to slightly above average chances of precipitation during that time period. So we'll need to watch for any interaction of moisture with that much below normal cold air in place over much of the eastern United States. So again, in summary, we do have the potential for a little light precipitation, including perhaps some flurries over the northeast Piedmont and northern coastal plain tonight. Again, that doesn't look like it's going to amount to too much, if anything. And then dry with moderating temperatures to near or even slightly above average as we get up into the 50s through the middle of the week. And then a little light rain centered around Thursday night, and that could be, 12 hours earlier or later. That's so sometime Thursday into Friday. And then it looks like mild on Friday, as we could see some 60s even. This graphic here shows 57 there. This is for the Raleigh-Durham area. But certainly we could have some 60s, particularly just south of Raleigh, down toward Fayetteville, parts of the southern Piedmont, Rockingham, Clinton, Maxon, Laurinburg, those areas. And then rain later in the weekend with that relatively strong system, and turning much colder by early next week behind that system. And that's all we have for you for this week. We'll do it again, same time, same place next week.